June 25th, 2024, Jacked Up coming to you across the WTOV 9 YouTube channel. Yours truly with you, Jack Hillgrove, talking about a couple of topics this evening as we get set for the dog days of summer. Baseball in full swing, no doubt about it. The Cleveland Guardians are well off as far as other teams across Major League Baseball go, with the exception of maybe the Yankees or the Phillies. But the Pittsburgh Pirates are still sniffing around in the National League, part of that group of National League teams that are still vying for a wild card spot. And it's a long ways away before we get into playoff baseball talk. I understand that, but it's this time of year right now where teams can really add to their roster via the trade deadline on July the 30th. We're going to talk a little bit about that as the show goes along as well. And the Stanley Cup Finals are in the books. Edmonton could not complete the 3-0 comeback officially. They would have been the first team since 1942. The Maple Leafs back in 42 came back in the Stanley Cup Finals from down 3-0. The Florida Panthers are Stanley Cup champs. I'm not optimistic about where that leaves the Pittsburgh Penguins going into the future, but that we will get to in a moment. We will start things here with baseball, and we will start with the Pittsburgh Pirates. 37-41 after Monday night's loss to the Cincinnati Reds at Great American Ballpark. 4 games under 500, 8.5 games back of the National League Central Division. But if you go up and down the standings in the National League, it's like everybody is right around 3, 4, 5 games below 500, with the exception of teams like the Phillies and like the Braves and other teams. The Dodgers are up there, obviously, in the National League. There are a ton of teams around the Mendoza line or a couple of games below that Mendoza line of 500 winning percentage that can fight for a National League playoff spot. And I anticipate out of that 10 or so group of teams, the 3 of them will make the playoffs. One of them can be the Pirates. And if you're thinking to yourself, that's crazy, when you boil it down, it's really not. Because the Pirates have Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, Mitch Keller, and Bailey Falter, who got roughed up a little bit last night, Monday night in the opener against Cincinnati on the road. But the starting pitching is there. The starting pitching is way there, to the point where these national media heads of across Major League Baseball, Jeff Passan, Buster Olney, people like that are saying that if I'm another team, I don't want to face the Pirates in a 5-game playoff series because of what they have at their disposal in the starting pitching rotation. But the offense leaves a lot to be desired. It definitely does. There are talks right now about whether or not Andy Haynes, the hitting coach of the Pirates, should keep his job. I don't think that this regime with Ben Cherington, Derek Shelton is equipped enough to be able to make a change like that midseason. So it looks like he's going to be here to stay at least through the end of the season. I'd be shocked if the Pirates made a switch at that position as hitting coach this regular season. So you have to adapt and you have to adjust. And the Pirates need to add to their offensive repertoire, so to speak, at the trade deadline. I'll give you a couple of names. We'll start in the realistic category. And then the one that might be a little bit of a pipe dream, it's a name that's been tossed around the Major League Baseball world as far as the big fish, so to speak, at the trade deadline. Are the Pirates equipped enough to make a move like that? Yes. And we'll talk about that in a second. But first, a couple of realistic moves that the Pirates could make at the deadline. The first one I'm eyeing up is Kevin Pillar, outfielder of the Los Angeles Angels. Started the season with the White Sox, was let go. The Angels picked him up for very cheap, less than $1 million for the remainder of this year. I think it's like $740,000 is his salary. And he's doing pretty darn well. The Angels are 31-46 at this point in the season. So you'd have to assume that they are sellers at the deadline because Mike Trout has been dealing with injuries and they're not really well equipped enough to make a run or at least come back from being, below 15 games below 500. So Kevin Pillar is a guy that plays a pretty darn good defensive center field. Maybe not as good as Michael A. Taylor, but Michael A. Taylor's hitting below 200. They need an upgrade in the outfield. Jack Sawinski ain't it either. I wouldn't hate a Kevin Pillar move. A 292 batting average so far this season, an 881 OPS. That would be top 4 on the Pirates this year. OPS, on-base percentage, plus slugging, one of the more money statistics, at least from my perspective, when it comes to evaluating offensive talent in the major leagues. Wouldn't hate a Kevin Pillar move, and it wouldn't take a lot for the Pirates to go get a guy like Kevin Pillar. Only making $740,000. He's very much a rental player, low risk, potentially high reward because he's swinging a good bat this year. And it wouldn't take a top 5 prospect. It might not even take a top 10 prospect to go get a guy like Kevin Pillar. The other one that's a little bit more lofty than Pillar, but very doable, is JJ Bleday, center fielder of the Oakland Athletics. Oakland's in a worse off spot than the Angels are, 29 and 52. They both play in the same division, and Oakland's got much worse of a record by 4 games to be exact. And Bleday would probably take a little bit more, and that's why I say it's a little bit more lofty, because he is under major league control through 2029, which makes me love the idea of going out and getting a guy like this even more. Number one, he's a Titusville, Pennsylvania native, which is cool. It's an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes north of Pittsburgh. So there's some family ties there for him. And this year, the offensive output, not quite as good as Pillar's, but he's younger. Pillar's in his mid-30s. JJ Bleday is not. And Bleday hitting 253 to this point in the Major League Baseball season, 799 OPS. That 799 OPS right now would be 3rd on the Pirates. Oh, I'm sorry, 2nd on the Pirates, only behind Brian Reynolds, who stunk at the beginning of the season. And the only reason why it's as high as it is for him right now is because he's on a 20-plus game hit streak to this point in 2024. The Pirates need offensive help. They need it in the outfield. I think that's where they go with the 9th overall pick in the Major League Baseball draft in a couple of weeks. Braden Montgomery, I should say, outfielder from Texas A&M. They just finished runner-up in the College World Series. That's a name that's been thrown around there a ton for the Pirates at 9th overall. Corner outfield guy, several years in college, wouldn't take much grooming in the minor leagues, and he brings a ton of power to the dish. I'm all for that. But right now, they need immediate depth in that outfield because Michael A. Taylor ain't getting it done from an offensive perspective. Jack Sawinski certainly isn't getting it done from an offensive perspective. And I think the jury is definitely out on our boy Captain Jack. On a batting average below 200, an OPS well below 600, they send him down to AAA for a week or two in the middle of this season, trying to get a little bit more confidence back in number 65, and it just hasn't worked. And I think you're getting to that point with him to where you need to move on. He might even be a part of a trade. I saw a concept out there where the Pirates do trade for JJ Bleday of Oakland, and Jack Sawinski is a part of that trade. If I'm the Athletics, I don't know how much I love that, but if you're able to get it done for a guy like that, I think that's an upgrade, especially with, you know, the sheer fact that the batting average and the OPS for Bleday are much higher than Sawinski's. Bleday's under major league control until 2029. So I welcome that. And I also welcome the big fish, Luis Robert Jr. He's a name that's been tossed around for the Baltimore Orioles, a team that right now is competing for a World Series spot. He's been tossed around for the Phillies, another team that might be in the World Series come October. But why not the Pirates? You know, the White Sox won't care. That's who Robert plays for. The White Sox aren't going to care if the team that trades for their best player, if they want to unload them, how good they're going to be. Are the Pirates going to make the World Series in 2024? Probably not. But like I said, the White Sox don't give a hoot. The White Sox want to get the best return on a guy like Robert as possible. And Pittsburgh can offer said return. Termarr Johnson, a top 100 prospect. Bubba Chandler, a top 100 prospect. Anthony Solometo, 2 starting pitchers, top 100 prospects in baseball. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt out there about what Robert's return could look like. The White Sox are expected to ask a Soto-like return for that. And if you're unfamiliar, Juan Soto, when he was dealt to the Padres from the Nationals. The Nationals got a crap ton of top-tier talent for a guy like Juan Soto. I don't think when it's all said and done, the return on Luis Robert will be quite as lucrative as Juan Soto's was, but it's still going to be pretty darn high. And the Pirates can make a trade package, I think, that the White Sox could find very enticing. And the flip side of that, and the devil's advocate to that is the Pirates have done a tremendous job through Ben Cherington and Derek Shelton's tenure as GM and manager of replenishing the farm system. Henry Davis, or at least they tried to. That's not looking great. Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, Anthony Solometto, Bubba Chandler from a starting pitching perspective. And then from an offensive output, they draft a guy like Mitch Jebb a couple of years ago who has shot up the organizational prospect ranks. And of course, the big one in the Pirates system is Termarr Johnson, who they selected 4th overall back in 2022. At some point with guys like that, the rubber's got to meet the road. The top of the organization has told Pirates fans ad nauseum this season and in off seasons past, we're right there. We feel like we've got the young talent to be competitive. I agree. I think it could be a situation where they could add in the right spots and be really competitive. And I go back to the Arizona Diamondbacks making the World Series after only winning 84 games in the regular season. That's out of the National League. The National League is wide open right now, with the exception of the Dodgers and the Phillies. But those two squads have been known to choke in the playoffs. The Phillies last year. At some point, the rubber's got to meet the road with these prospects. And it didn't in years past with the Pirates. The Pirates had the opportunity to trade Gregory Polanco when he was still a prospect for maybe a guy like Giancarlo Stanton when he was in Miami with the Marlins, or other big-time names that could have put the Pirates overboard that would have maybe helped them win one more game than the Cardinals in 2015. And they wouldn't have been in a wild card playoff, a one-game playoff against Jake Arrieta and the Cubs. Hindsight's 2020 on that. Gregory Polanco didn't work out, and it is what it is. But from my perspective, and that my pure opinion, if Termarr Johnson becomes a perennial all-star, a silver slugger bat for the White Sox, good for him and good for the White Sox. Wouldn't have to see them except for, 3 times during the regular season. And then if they were able to turn it around in the World Series, good for them. I don't care. I don't care because I think Luis Robert can help this team win now. Maybe not get to the World Series in 2024, but help build some positive momentum heading into 2025 and 2026, the money years. And guess what? He's under big league control for the next 3 seasons after this, meaning Luis Robert could be part of the core that brings another playoff run back to Pittsburgh. And then from a pure pitching perspective, as far as the prospects go, Jones, Skeens, Keller, Falter, 1 through 4. I'm fine with that. It has been phenomenal this season. So guys like Bubba Chandler, Anthony Solometto, Braxton Ashcraft, Thomas Harrington, they have a plethora of guys in double and triple A well on their way up to being very good pitchers in the big leagues in the next year or two. I'm okay if 1 or 2 of those guys gets dealt. Create a package for a guy like Luis Robert. Get him in here. Get him into this core group of guys because he will be under big league control for the next 3 seasons through 2026. To when all you Pirates cynics can say, oh, we'll be a Dodger or a Yankee when they don't have any more club control. That's fine. Jared Jones, that might happen to him. It might happen to Paul Skeens, but they'll all be a part of the same core with guys like Brian Reynolds and Key Brian Hayes that are signed long-term. Mitch Keller as well. You have the opportunity here, if you're Pittsburgh, to really put something together that's special, and they should, and I don't know if they will, but they should make a run at a guy like Luis Robert in the next couple of weeks. Why not? Win baseball games. It's what this regime was brought in here to do, to turn it around. The first half of the turnaround is set. They've replenished the farm system, and how? Now it's winning at the big league level. And they're on the cusp of doing that this year, despite the offensive woes and despite the bullpen struggling at times. They're only 4 games below 500 in a National League. That stinks. It's mediocre as all get out. Put yourself above the rest. Get a wild card playoff spot. And guess what? All of these Major League Baseball media heads at the national level saying, I don't want to face the Pirates. I don't want to face Paul Skeens and Jared Jones in a 5-game series. We can make that a reality. That is a very realistic feat in 2024, and they should do everything that they can. They are a little bit of a buffer there. Hopefully we're all set. Little technical difficulties there again. 50-26. They win game 1 against Baltimore in a tight game on Monday night as we record this on Tuesday. They have the opportunity to go out and replenish and really make a push for the postseason. And they're a little bit different where we're talking about the Pirates and we're talking about them adding offensively. Cleveland needs to go the pitching route, and the Miami Marlins should be the Guardians' best friend. Same thing for Cleveland. Go out and get a big fish. Go out and get a guy like Jesus Luzardo from the Marlins. Now, he has struggled. Lefty, 3-6 with an ERA at 5, but he's only 26 years old. Big league control at a market for Cleveland, who's not necessarily in the same boat as the Pirates because the Guardians have went out on a limb and have spent big on free agents in years past. But you've got this guy under big control for the next couple of years. And the farm system for Cleveland is good enough to where they're able to potentially get something done. Guys like Chase DeLauter, number 1 prospect in the organization, 20th prospect in all of baseball. And Jason Churio, 3rd prospect on the Guardians' top 30, according to MLB.com. 93rd on the top 100, according to MLB.com. And that's a lot. I mean, you look at that and you think, okay, I don't know if I'm comfortable as a Guardians fan giving up the top prospect, but what's coming up in a couple of weeks? Oh, yeah, the Major League Baseball draft. Where are the Guardians picking again? First. I'm not sure how well the MLB draft lottery will suit teams and suit the league in years to come. But if I'm the Guardians, I have a big old grin on my face because they're one of the best teams in baseball. They've turned it around this offseason. And because they fell in that category of the criteria, I should say, of who can be eligible for the draft lottery, they were there, they win it. The Guardians are selecting number 1 overall. And they're going to go get a big-time name at number 1. And that's going to be a guy that shoots right to the top of your prospect list. And with the emergence of college baseball and the talent level at the collegiate level for baseball, we're going to see probably a college player go number 1. And there's a couple of guys, I'll list them in a moment. But because college players are getting better and the talent pool is so much more plentiful there, whoever the Guardians take at number 1 isn't going to have to spend much time in the minor leagues. Guy like Paul Skeens didn't. He was a college player. Wyatt Langford went in the top 5 to Texas a year ago, outfielder out of Florida. He made the opening day roster for the Rangers after half of a season in minor league ball. So the Guardians are going to be able to get a guy to help replenish their farm system. So you can feel comfortable dealing a guy like Jason Churio or Chase DeLauter for a Jesus Luzardo, or even if you want to go the bullpen route, try and get 2 of them from the Marlins. Tanner Scott's a lefty out of the bullpen with a 1.64 ERA this year. I'm happy as a Guardians fan if they go out and get a starting pitcher of great caliber this trade deadline and a bullpen arm. And that puts them right in the thick of the Yankees and the Orioles and the Phillies if they're able to get past whoever in the American League. Puts them right in the thick of the upper echelon of baseball. They already are from an offensive standpoint. They just need to add to the rotation and to the bullpen to really become a threat for winning a World Series. And shout out to Stephen Vogt, man. I mean, he should win Manager of the Year. The guy has been phenomenal. So with that number 1 overall pick, not consensus, but what I've seen out there a lot of is Travis Bazzana, second baseman out of Oregon State. He's pretty darn good. And if I had to place a bet on it right now, will probably be who the Guardians go with. But J.J. Weatherholt of West Virginia is sitting right there as well. He was a name that was talked about as being almost a surefire number 1 overall pick at the end of last year's draft. He was, hit with an injury bug at West Virginia this year, but that'd be pretty darn cool. From an Ohio Valley standpoint, Pittsburgh adjacent, Mars High School for Weatherholt. Obviously, one of the best Mountaineers to ever do it from a baseball perspective. An option for the Cleveland Guardians, who are really in a good spot as far as the home stretch of the Major League Baseball season goes. All right, one more topic before we call it quits, and thank you for joining us on YouTube this evening. The NHL. Man, was I rooting for Edmonton to come back and beat Florida last night. They would have been the first team since 1942 to do it in the Stanley Cup Finals. Only the second one ever. Would have been the first since the Kings beat the Sharks in 2014 in the Western Conference Finals to come back from 3-0. It's only happened 5 or 6 times in NHL history. Would have been awesome, especially for Connor McDavid, who won the Conn Smythe. He's the face of the league, and he almost put Edmonton on his back to a Stanley Cup victory, but it just didn't happen. And we're going to tie this into the Pittsburgh Penguins. It does not look good. I am a cynic for the Penguins right now. Big time glass half empty kind of guy for the Gwins. 38, 32, and 12 was the record a year ago. They missed the playoffs for the second consecutive year. They don't shake up anything. Mike Sullivan stays. All the same the last couple of years. And if you look at it on paper and you look at what they did in the back half of the season to try and make the playoffs, great effort. But they didn't win half their games. You get points for overtime losses. The Penguins had 12 of them. That's 12 points to add to the 76 they get by winning in regular season games. Quick math. You like that? But there's 82 games in a regular season. Some more quick math for you. Half of 82 is 41. 41 is greater than 38, which is the amount of games the Penguins won last year. They lost more than half of their games. That's a problem. What's a bigger problem? $11.5 million in cap space this offseason as free agency gets ready to open up here in a couple of days across the National Hockey League. And for all you Penguin fans out there watching, holding on to the hope that Jake Gensel, because he won 2 Stanley Cups here and he loves playing with Sidney Crosby and the Jake Shake was named after him. He ain't coming back. No way. And I'm not sure the Penguins will even want to bring him up. They would want him back. Sure, he's one of the best young scorers across all of hockey. But I don't know that feasibly they can do it. Because at $11.5 million in cap space, it's 21st across the whole league. It's not great financially. When you've got guys like Erik Karlsson making $10 million a year, which that move didn't look very good on paper after, and it's easy to say that after the season he had. But Jake Gensel's going to demand $8 or $9 million a year. And I'm not sure that the Penguins and Kyle Dubas are going to want to blow 80% of what they have available funds-wise on one guy when there's questions in goal, questions on the bottom 6, which stunk, especially, the latter half of the season. And you look at a team like Carolina, who traded for Jake Gensel, who is right on the cusp of making the Stanley Cup Finals. They've got the 7th most cap space across the National Hockey League this offseason. $23 million. They can afford it. They're more enticing to Jake Gensel than the Penguins are from a pure talent and more likely to win now perspective. Saw a report earlier today that the Detroit Red Wings are going to make a push for Jake Gensel, or at least trying to. They've got the fifth most amount of cap space, $30 million. The Red Wings have available to them this offseason, and they won more games than the Penguins did last year. They've got a ton of good young talent. I would bet a sizable amount of money that Jake Gensel would not be a Penguin next season and won't sign back with Pittsburgh long term. It was a great run. He was one heck of a playoff performer and helped this team win Stanley Cups. But I think it's over in that regard. Now, the Penguins can add some pieces and move some money around and try to retool this roster the best that they can. But I look in the Eastern Conference, especially in the Atlantic Division, Florida, who just won the Cup. And if you're a hockey fan, play along with me in your head. And from a pure yes or no, do you think that these franchises are better off and more talented than the Penguins right now? Florida, no brainer. They just won the Stanley Cup. Detroit, I just listed them. My answer is yes. They won more games last year. They have more money at their disposal. They can retool their roster better than the Penguins can. Boston, absolutely. Toronto, despite way underperforming in off seasons or in playoffs past, yeah, they're more talented. Austin Matthews is one of the best players on the planet. And Tampa Bay, absolutely. And then you shift it over to the Penguins division. The Rangers and the Hurricanes, both way better off than the Penguins are right now. So with that logic, I'm telling you that the best case scenario for the Penguins is to finish third in the Metro and have to open up a playoff series on the road. And they haven't won a playoff series since 2018. Then you go over to the West. If somehow, by the grace of God, the Penguins catch fire in the postseason next year and make it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, Dallas, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Edmonton, who was just there, Colorado, and Vegas are all better than the Penguins right now. They are very much middle of the road. It stinks, and it pains me to say that because I grew up a Penguins fan. I grew up in elementary school when they won the Cup in 2009, which was phenomenal. It was almost cinematic. And then I was in high school, very much more inclined to enjoy sports as an older adolescent when they win 2 cups in a row. It was so fun. I was on senior trip after I graduated high school in Ocean City, Maryland, when the Penguins beat the Nashville Predators in 2017. Some of the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. That's not going to happen anytime soon again. And I hate to tell you that, but with $11.5 million at their disposal and so many teams with so much more young talent ahead of them, I think the core of Crosby, Malkin, and Letang has officially seen better days and has seen their final Stanley Cup hoisting. It came back in 2017. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on the WTOV9 YouTube channel. You can follow me on Twitter at JackWTOV9, and you can follow the station, WTOV9, on all of the social media platforms. We'll be back with more next week on Jacked Up. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.